Okay, it is 5:30, and we have a quorum, and I am calling the first part of our meeting to order, and we will immediately go into executive session. We are going into executive session to discuss item 2A. City Council shall convene into closed executive session pursuant to section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code to confer with City Attorney regarding the status of building Bastrop codes. For the audience and for the people at home, we will be done one way or the other and be back here to start our regular meeting at 6:30. So we will be back at 6:30 to convene our regular meeting. It is 5:30 and we are in executive session. Good evening. We have been in executive session, and so pursuant to item 3 on our agenda, there will be no actions taken as a result of our executive session at 5:30. So it is 6:30, and I am calling our regular session to order, and we have a quorum. I do want to mention that Councilmember Peterson is gravely ill, and our thoughts and prayers are with Bill and Willie and his entire family, and I would encourage everyone to keep him in your thoughts and prayers. So it is 6:30, and I'm calling the regular session to order. This evening we have 2 lovely young ladies. They are from Bluebonnet Elementary, and they are in 4th grade. And I'm going to ask them to come forward. I have Christina Fortinell. Christina, if you'll come stand up here by the podium and turn around and face the audience because they want to see your smiley face. And Sienna Alianis, right? I said it wrong. Alanis. She told me and I messed it up. And this is Sienna. Sienna was a charter member of the photography club. She was in it last year. And Christina is in photography club for the first time this year. And they both really like Mr. Vences. Our teachers do so many things to take care of our students, and this photography club is just another example. Now, Sienna's favorite subject is reading, and that's great because reading with your imagination, you can go anywhere. And Christina, her favorite subject is math, and it is Engineers Week, as you'll see in a proclamation later, so I'm planting all the engineering seeds in Christina that I possibly can. These 2 young ladies are going to lead us in the pledge. If everyone will please rise. Okay, girls, you can turn around, put your hand over your heart, and face the U.S. flag. Turn around and face the flag. There you go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state under God, and indivisible.
Let's give these ladies a round of applause. Mom and did family get pictures? Get enough pictures of them? Or okay, all right, we're all set. If you will remain standing, Police Chaplain Dale Burke will be giving us our invocation tonight.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this blessed city of Bastrop that we live in. And I thank you, Lord, that we have a community here of caring people, Lord, with godly values. And I thank you tonight for this each council member here, the mayor, the city manager, and each council member here. Lord, I ask that you give them wisdom and discernment, Lord, as they make decisions here tonight, and the fairness for each person that's presenting and for each thing that they have on their agenda. We just thank you for peace and wisdom tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. You may be seated. Okay, we're on to the mayor's report, and before we get started, I want to announce that the YMCA is doing what they are calling a celebrity cycleathon on February 19th. Commissioner Mel Hamner will be riding, Doc Jackson will be riding, Mayor Pro Tem Lyle Nelson, our Chief Altgeld, raise your hand, Chief Altgeld, he'll be riding, and myself, Andy Sexton, there'll be several folks will be riding in 30-minute blocks and collecting money, so you can even come by and make fun of us, but just bring a donation for the YMCA, please. If you go to the next page, you'll see some things I was doing. Sergeant Hamrick and Fire Chief Rosales were promoted, and we participated in that. There's some pictures of the MLK celebration. We've talked about that quite a bit. The ribbon cutting is from CrossFit Cohesion, and their kids were a part of the ribbon cutting, so we all got down on our knees because apparently you're supposed to exercise when you're there. And the Alive After 5 was later that same evening, which was a little less strenuous. I went to a TML workshop, the BISD Sportsman Banquet. You can see I'm there with Dr. Lee and Brian Gertz, and then right next to there, the KVUE. I was interviewed along with the county judge, and a couple of other businesses were interviewed, and there is going to be a news broadcast for KVUE, on KVUE, about how great it is to live and work in Bastrop, and that will be one day next week. They haven't told me which day. Texas had a ribbon cutting at Texas Pride, and I am standing up, and Brian is not standing on a box. He just really is a fantastic mechanic, and would encourage everybody to utilize that new business. I went to the BISD Ambassador Luncheon that Dr. Lee had, that was just a fantastic way to learn more about BISD. And I was also at their Board of Trustee meeting to recognize their board members, and you need to go online and look at some of the pictures. Their chairman of their board, Ashley Mushnick, is that green coat that he has on was painted by the school. It was a very cool thing, and they recognized their trustees. A little above that, I went to the high school production of The Addams Family, and yes, that is a picture of the pit crew, because they're never in any of the pictures, and I was in the pit crew, and I wanted to take a picture of the pit crew, and we talked about Councilmember Rogers' son was one of the leads in the play, and he did just a fantastic job, and we did board and commission training on January 24th. If you go to the next page, you'll see a little update on our It's Time Texas Challenge. Worked out at the Y on the 12th with Mayor Pro Tem Nelson, was at Camp Gladiator on the 19th, at Body Toners on the 26th, and Jazzercise at the 27th. And so I've gotten to meet a whole bunch of citizens. We've really had a good time. Last Saturday I was at HT Fitness. I'll have some pictures about that later. The update on the bottom of this was what I turned in on January 31st, and we now have 265 users, and as a community have lost 40 pounds in the month of January. So that's a small child. The planned events show some things that we've done. The library board meeting, this Sip, Shop, and Swirl was a huge success, and we're so proud of Rebecca Gleason and what a great job she did on that. And it's the 12th, and we're at the city council meeting. If we go to upcoming, you'll see that on Valentine's Day, I'll be out at the Federal Correctional Institute. They're having their quarterly community luncheon. I've mentioned the cycleathon on the 19th. On the 20th, 21st, and 22nd, I'm going to the Texas Economic Development Corporation's Legislative Conference. And then the food pantry empty bowl. Everyone enjoys the empty bowl. That's on February 23rd. There's some other activities going on that day, and then we'll be back at council on the 26th. So that is my mayor's report. Councilmember Rogers, do you have anything to report? Mayor Pro Tem Nelson.
Just real quick, that I worked out with y'all on the 12th, and evidently I'm still recovering because I didn't make it to any other workout, so I apologize for that. I did attend the Boards and Commission orientation on the 28th. Much appreciation to our city attorney for his great presentations. The Chamber Luncheon, where our police chief presented, had a great presentation. Attended the Hunters Crossing Local Government Corporation board meeting on the 6th, and the Parks Board, very active Parks Board, on the 7th. And then tomorrow I'm going to represent our fine city at the Clean Air Coalition, and that's pretty much it for me, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem Nelson. Councilmember Ennis?
Thank you, Mayor. As you all know, I'm the liaison to the Art and Public Places Board. I attended their February meeting. They're working hard on all their projects, but specifically wanted me to mention that they're in the middle of their 2D and 3D calls for 2D art and 3D art for this year, and I'm sure we will see the end result of their hard work soon popping up all over town. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Ennis. Councilmember Jones? All right. City Manager, do you have anything for us?
Yes, ma'am. Last week, the Supreme Court determined that they were not willing to hear the petition on the Pine Forest Unit 6 case. So at this point in time, for all intents and purposes, that case is just about over. The claimant does have the ability to file a petition and ask the Supreme Court to reconsider the case. It's my understanding that that rarely happens, so that is good news to bring that issue to a close.
Thank you for that update, City Manager. And anything else? We are moving on to item 7D, one of my favorite weeks, Engineers Week. So I have a quick proclamation. Whereas engineers use their scientific and technical knowledge and skills in creative and innovative ways to fulfill a society's needs, and whereas engineers face the major technological challenges of our time, from rebuilding towns devastated by disaster, cleaning up the environment, and assuring safe, clean, and efficient sources of energy, to designing information systems that will speed our country into the future. And whereas engineers are encouraging our young math and science students to realize the practical power of their knowledge, and whereas we will look more than ever to engineers and their knowledge and skills to meet the challenges of the 21st century, now therefore I, Connie Schrader, Mayor of the City of Bastrop, do hereby proclaim February 17th through the 23rd as Engineers Week. If the city engineer would come forward, let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much. You asked if I had words of wisdom. It's been a great ride since I've been here. Never a dull moment. We certainly don't lack the things to do. This is a great place to work, and I really enjoy being here. Thank you all very much. Thank you
very much, Jerry. We continue to get fabulous feedback on Mr. Pallady. Really pleased to have him. All righty. And for the next proclamation, I'm going to call Dr. Lee up because we're going to share I'm going to read about Black History Month, and she's going to take it to the school board, and since they're a part of the community together, so I'll read it down there. Whereas the origins of Black History Month can be traced to the scholar Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who created the Association for the Study of African American Life and History in 1915, because African Americans have played a central role in our nation's history, but for too long, historians ignored or glossed over their contributions and injustices they have suffered. And in 1926, Dr. Woodson conceived a yearly celebration to help rectify the omission of the African Americans from history books, and was made official by presidential designation in 1976. And whereas today the observance of Black History Month throughout the United States stands as testament to the success of Woodson's project and an example of how we can work together to make the teaching of history more honest, and whereas the theme of 2019 Black History Month is Black migrations, and focuses the movement of African Americans to new destinations and subsequently to new social realities. And whereas, having faced slavery, many forms of oppression, deep-rooted adversity, and the real dangers of demanding equality and change, the contributions and achievements of African Americans are imbued with a unique strength and resilience which are respected and greatly valued. Whereas Governor Greg Abbott stated in his January 31st, 2019 proclamation several examples of excellence throughout the African American history in Texas, including Bessie Coleman, who grew up in Atlanta, Texas, and inspired people all over the world, shattering long-held stereotypes as the first African American to become a pilot. And Richard Overton, an American hero and Texas legend born right here in Bastrop County, who stood out even amongst America's greatest generation, who selflessly risked their lives in World War II. Now, therefore, I, Connie Schrader, Mayor of the City of Bastrop, do hereby recognize the month of February 2019 as Black History Month. The city does everything in partnership, and that was one of the reasons I asked Dr. Lee to come today, because the school will also be working on Black History Month. And if you'd like to say anything, you're welcome to do that as well.
I just want to thank you and the council and our city manager for the leadership in continuing to do things like this, because if we don't, then it falls by the wayside, and it signals to the world that it's no longer important, and it's always important, and we want our children to know that. So thank you very much. I will present this on Tuesday.
Thank you very much. Let's step away from the mic. Step away from the mic. Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. Okay, we are going to have something on the agenda for the next few weeks, and I am moving on to work sessions and briefings. The item is item 8A, update and discussion of current legislative session and its impact on local municipalities. Some of you that watch the news may have seen a press conference that Governor Abbott and Speaker Bonin and Senator Bentoncourt had about the property tax relief. They're calling it the property tax relief bill. What the bill, it's Senate Bill 2 and House Bill 2. Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1 are setting their budgets. So it's the very first bill that they can do. They've made it a priority. And what it is doing is capping school district taxes, county taxes, and city taxes. So that's great. That's their plan, and shockingly, I have an opinion about that, and I'm going to share with you. One of the things I want to visit about is to make sure that you understand the impact and the consequence of some of the decisions that are being discussed right now. I did a little bit of history, and I'm sure my history buff friends, I'm looking at Mayor Pro Tem Nelson, may or may not know that we are on our 7th Texas Constitution. Did you know that? Of course you did. It was written in 1873 and it was adopted in 1876. It was written in 1873 by some pretty wily Democrats that took over from the Republicans and said, we have got to have a restriction on the size of government and the scope of state government. So they wrote it in 73, it was voted on in 76, and it won 2-1 was the vote. That's a long time ago. And although there have been several efforts to talk about reform, and it's been so long ago we need to come up with a new constitution, those reforms have never been successful. And the article that I was reading said the following: whatever the flaws of the existing Constitution, it is clear the Texas Constitution accurately reflects the culture that wishes to restrict state government powers and is suspicious of centralized power. The main thing that the state is charged with is funding public education, human and health and human services, public safety, and crime prevention. That's the main things that they do. And in the public safety is roads. That's part of public safety is state roads. So, Glenn Hager reported that in 2018, the state revenue is going to be up 8.1%, which I guess it's okay for their revenue to go up. The sales tax that they're collecting is $32 billion, according to Glenn. So let's talk about sales tax. Our local sales tax rate is 8.25, and everybody knows that. 6.25% of that goes to the state, and that's how they get their $32 billion, which is 27% of their total budget. 1% of that comes to the city. The city collected $4.8 million last year. 0.5 cent goes to the EDC, the Economic Development Corporation, and 0.5 cent goes to the county. So when you pay your local sales tax, 1 penny of that, 1% of that, comes to the city of Bastrop. But this bill, Senate Bill 2 and House Bill 2, are about property tax. Let's talk about property tax. When you get your bill, and whether you pay it monthly or you pay it at the end of the year, you get that little love note that comes from the appraisal district that tells you what your property taxes are going to be. And if you look at those, you'll see that 56% of that bill goes to Bastrop Independent School District. 22% comes to the county and 22% comes to the city. So last year, what the bill that they proposed only restricted city taxes. So they did this year say, well, they were going to put a cap on all three. Glenn Hager has stated that in 2018, the state is only going to fund 36% of the cost of public education. It was not that long ago that they funded 50%. The state funded 50%, and then the local made up the difference with 50%. Well, Robin Hood and a lot of real complicated formulas, the state's now at 36%. Well, guess who gets to make up the difference? That's why your tax bill is 56% going to the school district, because we as a community, as a state, and as a nation have agreed that we need to provide public education to our students. So let's talk about, I want to go back because I'm mainly talking about Senate Bill 2 and House Bill 2. One of the things that I don't particularly care about is that while it's restricting the school district's ability to raise taxes and raise tax revenue, it does not identify how the state is going to make up the difference between the 36% to the 50%. One of the things that it mandates is that we have to have elections every November if anybody goes over the 2.5%. Well, November's kind of a nice month if you're running for a state office, but you'll notice that November is after school starts. It's after we set our budget, which starts on October 1st. And oh, by the way, those elections cost $5,000 to $10,000, and that will have to come out of the city revenue as well. So let's talk about what this means to a person who lives in Bastrop. Last year, we had the same tax rate. We've had the same tax rate for several years, but it's true that there was an increase in evaluations. So our property tax that was collected by the city of Bastrop was $247,000 more than it was the year before. But $127,000 of that was from new properties that came on the tax rolls that all needed new services. So only $119,000, and I don't mean only as in it's not that much money, but $119,000 was collected in addition from the year before, which is an increase of 2.3%, which, by the way, you'll notice is below 2.5%. So had this bill been in place, it would have made zero impact to the bill that you got and you paid. So when you hear about this bill and you think it's going to be a major tax relief, I wouldn't go booking my trip to the Riviera, because the difference in the city taxes would be $0. And let's look at what our residential homes pay. The average value of a residential home in the city of Bastrop is $170,000, which means that the city taxes that you pay, according to our current rate, is $959 a year. So if this bill gets put in place, it would say if with a 2.5% cap, you could only raise it by $23.97 a year. If you kept the cap at 8% where it is currently, you could raise the bill $76.72. So, the most savings that you're going to get with this great tax relief bill is $52.75 for the entire year, and the only way you would get that savings is if the city had planned on going all the way to an 8% tax increase, and the city's never gone all the way to the rollback rate. So my concern is that at the end of the day, it's about local control. It's our home and it's our decisions. We have, I do want to be honest that Senate Bill 2 and House Bill 2, they are saying you have to have $15 million collected in property tax and sales tax for you to be impacted by the bill. Right now, Bastrop is at about $10 million, so we would be exempt from the bill, which that means many of you are saying, then why are you even talking about it? They are already having conversations about, well, this will be the first 150 cities, but then we'll make the number lower. There'll be a way for people to opt into it. So we can't ignore it just because we're exempt. But the questions and the things I want all of us to think about is we have to address public school financing by the state. The state has got to quit handing down unfunded mandates. We have an unfunded mandate and you're restricting our ability to raise revenue. There's no place for anyone to go. I want to remind you, if this bill had already been in place, it would be no impact on Bastrop. So although it says it's a relief, it's not much of a relief. But the most important thing I want to share with you is I have been mayor. In May it will be for 2 years. I've gotten lots and lots of phone calls, but the phone calls I get, people want more services, more facilities, more programs. I have never had anyone call me and say, please stop doing this. Please quit spending money on this. Please don't come to my neighborhood with a fireman or a policeman. Everyone wants us to use the money wisely, and we work hard to do that. But we've got to have realistic expectations. The other thing I want to visit with you about is I don't know how often you've seen Governor Abbott. In the time that I've been mayor, I got to meet him, I got to shake his hand. I've seen him once. I will share with you that myself and each of my elected colleagues on this dais, you guys have an opportunity to visit with us about every decision we make, not just the tax rate. You talk to me in the grocery store, at church, at soccer games, at football games, at council meetings. We're with our constituents all the time. And we have an election every May. We're all on the same page. We're all property taxpayers. But I just want to make sure that when you hear things on the news that you're seeing the full story. Council, does anybody else have anything they would like to add about the Senate bills?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I find it incredulous that our state government is doing to the local communities, or attempting to do to local communities, exactly what the feds did to us 30 years ago to the states. And this, to cap this and eventually include a city the size of Bastrop into this capped rate, I should say, could preclude us from hiring another fireman or hiring another police officer or needed city services such as our capital improvement projects. It's really going to cut in our ability to exercise our local control. And I'm greatly concerned that without the local control that there's going to be a myriad of city services that are going to be cut. Now, I admire the work that you've put into this and bringing this to our attention.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem Nelson. So some of you may say, well, what do you want us to do about it? I would encourage you to contact Representative Cyrier and Senator Watson and just tell them it's our home, it's our decision. And with that, we will move on to item...
Mayor?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to go back and reiterate and make sure that me and everyone else understands what you said when you started. One of the fundamental constitutional charges of state government is funding public education. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And part of the reason that the school district's tax bill is so high is because local folks are paying for public education, not the state. So if we want tax relief, the state legislature needs to do what they're constitutionally charged to do, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So when we ask them to call their senator and their representative, it is about local control, it is about local decision, but if you want tax relief, ask your legislatures to do what they were constitutionally charged and elected to do. And then our local money can be spent on our local needs.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones?
And I also just want to point out that a lot of these unfunded mandates that are handed down to us, I would encourage you to take a few minutes to look into what's behind that, because I think many of them are very disturbing, and there's a lot of people getting rich off of that, and I don't personally agree that they are for our benefit at all. So if anyone wants to understand what I'm talking about, I'm happy for you to contact me.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Jones. Any other comments? All right, we will be moving on to item 8B, update and discussion of building Bastrop to include guiding policy statement and update of progress of development codes since the design and code rodeos by Matt Lewis. Hi, Matt.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Matt Lewis with Simple City Design. First, I want to apologize. I'm not feeling really well, so if I miss anything, feel free to jump in. This is humble. So it feels like we just lifted our heads, and here we are. It's February. We, over the last few months, have been evaluating. Oh, thank you. What we heard from the design rodeos, what you all have on your books currently. We've also been reviewing what the DNA analysis reported and the standards that came out of that. Basically, what is the existing character of your downtown, and what are the numerical values which make that up? We've been extracting and looking through and recoding back into how this will fit back into your new codes. And we are trying to ensure that the building Bastrop is able to accomplish what you're striving to achieve. Building Bastrop was born with a focus on resolving area flooding, which is Bastrop is prone to, and updating the development regulations and the key components which make up the built environment of your community, as well as protect and enhance the natural environments. As the community prepares for a large population increase, which you're in the path of, we felt it extremely important to continue to question how might we and what if we used a variety of tools to resolve these issues? And what if we introduce something new? And what if we introduce something old that you already have back into the development regulations that your existing codes have coded out? Your existing downtown environment is basically illegal under majority of your development standards. You can't build it in today's time. Or we thought, what if we blend the two and make something really special that's fiscally viable and can emulate the patterns that the community was striving to accomplish, both in the comprehensive master plan as well as the inputs that we heard from the rodeos. Feels like just yesterday we were sitting in the room with the council and community members having these conversations about housing mix, about transportation options, about how the city looks, feels, and functions into the future, and how the services can serve both the community today and the community of the future as we progress onward. Oops. Oh, I didn't do that. Okay. And we've asked really bold questions, and your community was responsive with acceptance. And so we have really challenged ourselves to think through the status quo and to really create what authentic Bastrop means to you all, and what authentic Bastrop can be reflective into the codes or the policy direction which you provide for your community going forward. And what we learned is a series of themes continue to pop back up, which we believe we need guidance on, so that as we're writing and drafting these standards that are going to inform your future developments, they need to reflect back to the character that you all have and to the goals that you've set forth in your existing plans and ideas. We've come up with what we're calling the Building Bastrop Block Code, B3. It is extremely localized. We're customizing these standards to ensure that they achieve the scenarios that we put forth in front of you all and from the community, that they can accomplish the 30,000-foot goals that your plans have put forth for your comprehensive master plan, for your transportation planning. Furthermore, we want to ensure that what we're creating is administrable and it matches the staff roles, the development process, the council procedures, and so that you're administering the right units of metrics and not the wrong ones, and that the outcomes of those lead to the results that you're striving to accomplish. With that, we've started to go back to the foundational elements. As you were talking about the constitutional elements, what is it set forth out in the local government code that cities have the authority to regulate? And it's life safety, it's public infrastructure, public utilities, civic spaces, parks, greenways, subdivision ordinances, environmental regulations, and the list goes on and on. The cities have a key series of foundational elements which they oversee, which need to be inclusive into these codes as we go forward. And knowing that, we continue to return back to some key elements that were outlined in Building Bastrop, the terminology. Geographically sensitive, building with nature, emulating patterns that you already have on your ground, making sure that we're looking at the environmental constraints or fiscal constraints or topographic constraints. And topographic constraint that's that's environmentally, geographically sensitive could be a railroad divide, some physical barrier, Highway 71 overpasses. They're geographic barriers, and when you write your development standards, they need to emulate those patterns so that we understand what's on the ground today and we can help those decisions inform the future. Fiscally sustainable. How do the developments or preservation areas pay for themselves? And does it happen once or does it happen to eternity? Are we leaving the community of the next generation off in better fiscal health than what we arrived at, right? And those types of conversations are really critical. An authentic Bastrop. That was one of the most prevalent words we heard throughout the entire time that we've been trying to accomplish this. Authenticity is something, you know it when you see it and you can feel it, and it has this sense of arrival. And once you come over the bridge in downtown and you arrive into the downtown area, you feel this special place, and Bastrop emulates that. The next one is walkable or well-connected. Connectivity was a word that came up quite often through this. This is also a term that's identified in your comprehensive plan as one of the number one goals of the community. And walkable places are comfortable places that have access to daily services. Short blocks create walkability. Shaded sidewalks, well-defined spaces lead to what could be considered walkable. Awnings, street trees, those types of things. Short distances, slow roadways. So you can add all of those elements, and we'd like to have conversations about that. And then furthermore, that leads to timeless places. Your downtown has been in the same configuration for 186 plus years, and it has fostered the turn movements of horse and buggies to vehicular cars that we have today to autonomous vehicles in the next generation, right? And yet the overall built environment and the built patterns have not had to transform at all. The buildings have been in the exact same configurations, and they changed from a bank to a restaurant to a boutique, clothing shop, back to a newspaper stand, right? And so as the buildings and the market trends morph, the environment still provides for a timeless environment. Excuse me. And then there may be other things, but we need some guidance from the council for some policy direction about these statements, because we know where we're trying to go, and we believe that these characteristics can lead us there and have some direct input into the codes as we go forward. Either one, ma'am. We can do it. Would you like to do it now?
One of the things that I want to reiterate that Matt is saying and really need to hear from y'all is consistently, you have talked about the conflict that we have with our current codes. They don't let us build what it is we want. And so part of this journey is to align our codes back to the comprehensive plan. This journey is about removing the conflict of the plan. It's about putting in flexibility. But the one thing that comes to mind when we talk about geographically sensitive, and Matt hit on it, this is often the things that create the challenge that makes a one-size-fits-all approach to code not work. And it's been interesting as I have oriented myself into the community, how many geographically sensitive elements we have. When you think about State Highway 71, that's a pretty significant divider. And I didn't appreciate that until when we were doing the code rodeo. We had several people reach out to us that were interested in transportation other than the automobile. And we had one lady in particular that is physically disabled and relies on her wheelchair to get around town. So staff went out and walked with her as she rolled through town and really appreciated the geographical obstacles that we had. But the number one thing she said to us time and time again, and Matt can affirm this, was State Highway 71. It's a physical barrier. Then we got to talking to her, well, guess what else is a barrier? The railroad. There are 12 crossings in town. And so when you begin to place State Highway 71 in the railroad, we don't think about that as being a geographical sensitive element, but it is. We often talk about Gills Branch and Piney Creek because we all know drainage is the number one challenge that we have. And the little conduits that come off of those creeks are a geographically sensitive element. That also creates a lot of floodplain that has to be managed. We talk about soils. We know when we are in the toad habitat up on the hill, it's very sandy. As we come down the bluff and we cross the river, it becomes clay. We also talk about the Houston toad. So one of the things that y'all have said that I really want us to affirm, because as we move forward, this is going to become a policy statement. All things are going to lead back to the foundation elements that will be in this policy statement we're going to ask you to craft. And my team will tell you words matter. So we need to not only hear these words from you, but it would be helpful if we could spend just a few minutes talking about what these words mean to you. So when we dial down and use things like State Highway 71 and soils and creeks, is that how y'all associate with geographical sensitivity? And Mayor, if we can, as we go through each one of this, have some dialogue, that would be helpful, not only to the consultants, but staff, so that as we move forward, we know we're getting this right.
So council, I would like council to speak first from a geographically sensitive, when you see those words, is that something you think that we should be concerned about? Is that a part of the policy, or do you have some additional questions? Councilmember Ennis?
So what you're talking about is we have zoning codes like SF7, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, sir.
This new code in its geographically sensitivity, if that's even a phrase, would be designing for different areas to take into account the geography and say the Houston toad, et cetera, et cetera. When you're talking about that, that's what you're talking about. In other words, we're not going to have a SF7 for the whole city, and that's all you can build, right?
Yes, sir. Right now you have one size fits all from your subdivision ordinance, your zoning ordinance, and you've got a variety of products, both building types and that you coded out. And so what we're saying is that you could write a geographically sensitive code that would say the standards in downtown may not be applicable along 71, for example. Your signs, you wouldn't want 6 square foot signs on 71. No one would be able to read them, right? But you also, therefore, wouldn't want 71 size signs located in your downtown. They would overwhelm the architecture, the overall form. That's just an example, but all of those individual elements can be calibrated to be sensitive to its geography. And it could go all the way down to a site, an individual site, rather than saying that you have to have 25-foot setbacks, 5-foot side yards, 35-foot rear yard, and you've got a 150-year-old pecan tree right at the 25-foot mark. that you don't want to take back, you're now putting someone into a process to vary for something that is on the ground. So that's not very geographically sensitive to that site constraint. Well, what if we, and how might we allow the building to move around on the lot a little bit to use the geographic nature that's on the site today? And so that's one example, is really thinking through these patterns to allow for more flexibility so that there are not so many questions that have to be called, that the existing patterns can help inform the decisions through the policies as you create them.
So we get rid of the cookie cutter code, which is essentially, if that's a term, if that's a good term for it.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, sir.
That's what we asked you to do. Good.
Councilmember Jones?
So I know something that we've talked about as a council that you've touched on is, instead of just pushing people around and making them do stuff a certain way, it's like, how can we allow people to do what they want to do that's going to work in the area that they are in? For example, Tahitian Village, which is very, very different than Hunter's Crossing, which is very different to downtown.
That's right.
And so, I mean, I see that as part of the geographic sensitivity, is just, you know, the flip side of that is, how can we do what we want to do and not have it be a big battle?
We as citizens, right?
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yeah, to continue to ignore these obvious barriers to our the growth of our community is just asinine, and I appreciate you bringing it to our attention. And this is Bastrop, and we've been very clear when we started this process to alleviate drainage and flooding issues that the cookie cutter, and to use the words of Councilman Ennis, just will not work in our area. We can't continue to beat our heads against that wall. And I would like for our policy to clearly state that we're trying to make this authentic Bastrop. We're trying to make it fiscally sustainable. And I think that's a key word. And the fact that we're approaching it from a holistic way rather than stovepipe mentality is indicative of what we're trying to do in this community to manage the growth that we know is coming. And so I would like for our policy to truly reflect what we intend to do with this process. It started in looking at the drainage and flooding issues, and if we take a holistic approach, as has been discussed, we're going to build something that's going to last for a long time. So, thank you.
Councilmember Rogers, do you have any comments?
I just want to touch base on what Councilmember Jones says, because she hit it on the nail from my side. What you want to build in Tahitian isn't exactly what you want to build in Hunter's Crossing. And opening it up where people can make those decisions is what we're wanting it to do, and make it, you know, sustainable. So, good way of putting it.
I have a slightly different approach to it, and that is, we're talking about the results being cookie cutter. I think part of the problem, one of the things I'm irritated about, I was irritated about it on planning and zoning, and I've heard the frustration from developers and citizens, is we have codes that have conflicts because we tried to cookie cutter and heard that Georgetown had adopted something, so we picked up 3 paragraphs and slapped it down in the center. And I'm tired of trying to be 27 different cities and losing ourselves in that. So I'm very interested. I don't care if our code will ever work for anyone else. I don't care. I need a code that works for Bastrop. So that part is really important to me. And the other thing that I want is for it to not, I don't want it to be where the answer you get depends on who happens to be standing behind the counter when you walk in the door and ask the question. We've got to have something that's got clarity and consistency, and if the next council wants to move things one way or another, that's fine. We can tweak things, but I don't want to get phone calls that somebody's gotten 4 different answers from 3 different visits, and I don't think I'm the only one that's been getting those calls. Is that anybody else may want to chime in?
That is helpful. So geographically sensitive, let's just skip down to authentic while we're in that. I heard clarity, I heard consistency, I heard no cut, copy, paste. We are not to use another city as a model. So if we embrace our geographically sensitive nature, we can't do that and be authentic. Is that a right way for me to link that together? The fiscal sustainable comes directly from the comp plan. One of the things that's in our work plan, one of the things that was budgeted this year was to meet the comprehensive plan action item that requires a fiscal sustainability model. We've put that in because every time we have a conversation, fiscal sustainability are the two words I can be guaranteed to come forward. I think, Mayor, your comments during the legislative update speak to fiscal sustainability moving forward is not an option.
Right.
And we've got to figure out how that looks and what that looks like. Matt, why don't you talk a little bit about the elements in your experience that you know have to happen for fiscal sustainability to occur?
And so that does take me into the next few slides. As we started running through these scenarios and we started to draw some of the plans that we had created during the design rodeos, we tried to use subdivision ordinances, zoning ordinances, and continue to come back to these conflicts. So I'm going to walk you through a series of these plans, and many people saw the illustrators and the designers actually drawing these plans at the events during the design rodeo. And the intent of this was to truly analyze the outputs that could be possible under new development standards. And so what we did is we used the numerical values of your downtown, the framework that you have already on the ground. These are 330-foot blocks by 330-foot blocks, emulated with a variety of building patterns. These are also real tracts of land located in Bastrop, Texas, that are currently undeveloped. And what we wanted to do is evaluate how might these standards apply on the ground to create entry features.
Matt, what's magic about 330 by 330? Because you could have picked any other number, so talk to me about what's the right number.
I could spend hours about that, but
Please don't spend hours.
But it is really fascinating. When Bastrop was originally laid out, they laid the town out in farm lots. And the farm lots got broken down into building blocks. Farm lots were 722 feet by 722 feet. Those break down into 330-foot blocks with 55.5 feet of right-of-way. This is a pattern that the original creators of the town used. And so what we said is that was a logical way of building, because a farm lot could host a farm and provide food, and then it could be broken down into the building blocks. And as development started to occur, then they would incrementally start building out these blocks. That incremental development pattern got lost, and we started doing these much larger scale. So returning back to this incremental pattern of building, and when you all are talking about being light and letting people do, our starting point for this code was, how do we not enter into the code? What can people accomplish on their own and without triggering compliance of the code before you even get started? So we've been thinking through the most incremental fashion of development in order to allow for this to come back to life, and we returned back to the farm lots and the building blocks. And so these are farm lots being broken down into building blocks in its original form.
So the 330 is not because that's a number that you pulled from another city. That's going back to how Bastrop was originally laid out.
Yes,
when I'm running, the next time I'm running, I could try to estimate, and I can find a block that's 330 feet.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
They're prevalent throughout the district. And so what we did is we used the information we received from the rodeos to really start challenging this. And so what we've done is we've laid this framework out. And so you have a series of gridded networks of streets with a variety of housing types that would allow for small lots to be sold, so that individual property owners could buy a small portion and have access to close proximity to services, to relief from green in case there's high density. And then what we had is an illustrator actually draw perspectives of what it would look like walking through these neighborhoods, which we would like to code. And as we started to create these patterns, we continued to come back to those policy foundation statements, because all of those are thematically connected to your downtown and into what we were trying to design for the future. So the perspective I'm about to show will be within this area, and you will be walking from the front porch of the house there toward this patio. And this is what it turns out like. And so we said, what if you had a variety of housing types? There's small houses there, there's large houses there, and they all front on a central green. This is illegal under your existing zoning because of this courtyard housing. Your zoning and subdivision ordinance doesn't allow for this. We think it's a product that would be well received. and it could be something that could be coded into Bastrop. And so we're showing, again, these are conceptual drawings just saying how might we and what if we allowed for these types of things to take place. These renderings show that you would have common lots, or they could be individual subdivided lots, but the building forms and the building placement are what's important in the way that they interrelate to create spaces. The next plan we did is a highway frontage, 71 frontage. The buildings outlined in gray are the existing buildings, and the color buildings are the newer buildings. Does this work? Oh yeah, it does work. Okay. And so the area or perspective, this is an aerial view looking down into the development, and actually you can also see all the way back through this area. So here's an aerial view to demonstrate how everything would lay out. And again, these are 330 foot blocks, again, using that same parameter. And this time we allowed for pedestrian breaks to create the 330 foot blocks even. So just showing different patterns and different lot configurations and block configurations and different building forms. We also integrated a variety of building types, which is what we heard quite a bit. So you'll see a lot of density, and it transitions into a different development pattern. We put this intensity out along 71, so it provides this really seamless transition into lower density areas, and it's got a variety of housing types and lot mixes throughout the areas. I really wish we could really zoom into this. It's an incredible piece of work, and stormwater management was integrated into it. Walkability is a critical piece, as well as the being geographically sensitive. And so the thought would be that you could have these dry ditches when it's not raining that the kids go play in, and when it gets wet, then they get a little muddy, right? When the water's there, it comes in, it fills up, and then it drains out into a normal flow. And so it could be a centerpiece. You could design that as a wet pond if it's appropriate. But the thought is to handle stormwater as a amenity, not a afterthought. Putting it with a 4-foot liners and a chain link fence around it, and putting it on the corner of your most valuable real estate, right? And that's oftentimes what happens with the way that drainage happens. And so what we want to do is try and show how it can be emulated into the overall design concepts.
Matt?
Yes, sir.
Does that rendering that space for commercial as well as residential, right?
Yes, sir. The design element is to allow for ground floor commercial or office with residential above, or as the market trends would support it, you could even have office and retail upstairs, right? And so it would be flexible to allow for market trends to shift, just like your downtown does now. It can change with the market and stay in the existing configuration as it has currently.
And the lower left corner is towards 71, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Here is another plan. Again, we're using the same structure, introducing a variety of building patterns, a variety of building types, integrated in using geographic sensitivity, fiscal sustainability, and we think that these will work. And so what you'll see here is there's a view from a front porch looking down into the pavilion. These are a variety of building types, even some that you have in your downtown, integrated with fourplexes, mansion homes, estate lots, single family lots. So a variety of residential building patterns are going to be shown in this. And again, this was a challenge we took on because we believed that the input that was happening at the rodeos, the community really sought after these types of integrations, and so we really wanted to push these bold concepts to see how they would lay out and how it would be received. And so the infrastructure supports this. You see street trees, and it's a walkable space, well-defined areas, maybe a community garden out front, a pavilion that could be used by the entire community, a variety of building types. I don't know if I can zoom in on this or not, but the building on your far right is a building that may have 6 units in it, and it looks kind of like a Main Street building, but it may function as residential now, and maybe later it transitions into a little coffee shop, and maybe later it transitions into an office space. And so the thought would be that the uses could morph within the actual buildings, and so that the buildings, again, are timeless, but it allows for a variety of uses and lifestyle choices to be integrated in with a variety of costs.
While you have this up, why don't you talk about walkable and what you found downtown and how that got replicated here?
Yes, ma'am. So downtown, it's extremely walkable. One, you either have awnings over the sidewalks, which provide shade. You've got a slow-moving lanes of traffic, short blocks, and it makes it to where people will want to walk further. If you don't have awnings over the sidewalks, you have street trees, and so there's some shade cover throughout the downtown district that creates that. Slow-moving cars, and so you'll have on-street parking that buffers the sidewalks from the moving lanes, right? Versus if you go walk along Highway 71 frontage, you may have a 4-foot sidewalk next to a lane that's going 55 miles an hour with no shade trees or disconnected sidewalks, and so it's not as walkable. You may walk it, but it's not an inviting place to be walkable as your downtown is. Your downtown makes you walk down the streets, you keep your head high, you're looking out, you look at the signage, and it's informing what you're coming up to. You have this constant sense of arrival by either being informed by the building types, by the architecture, by the proximity of how the buildings relate to the streets. All of these key components inform the way that we feel, the way that the environment makes up. And it also is part of the development characteristics. A lot of those characteristics you've coded out based off of where you put your parking lots and where you're required to put your minimum setbacks. And so this physical disconnect is by design, by requirement of your existing codes. So you've coded that out currently, is what I'm trying to say.
And I think that's become really obvious as we looked into drainage and found that our codes support building stuff that creates problems, which is what started this whole thing.
Mr. Lewis, all of these renderings and the thought processes were encompassing parking and the green space and transportation elements into this, so that we're approaching this again from holistic. You're going to hear that a lot from me, rather than the stovepipe mentality that creates, as Councilmember Jones says, problems.
Yes, sir.
And I want our policy to truly reflect that we're alleviating problems and not creating problems. We're trying to build something toward the future.
Yes, sir, and that is correct. It's extremely important that all of the elements of development get integrated in. Parking is an element of development that is prevalent in today's time, and we must account for it. Stormwater management. But as we think through these policy decisions, and as we've challenged ourselves as consultants to take apart every single part: zoning, subdivision regulations, environment, parking standards, landscaping, sign standards. All of these elements that make up development need to be put back into place, and we've unpacked the entire system thinking about what's the lightest we can start, and then building up to the building full communities like what we're having happen at a rapid rate. All of the elements have been thought through and built into these renderings. Yes, sir. And not only that, they're meeting the existing standards that you have in your downtown. They're numerically correct and accurate, which leads me one thing that we haven't really talked about, which is the golden ratio. And it's a mathematical equation you see often in nature. And essentially, we've been thinking through how these codes can emulate those patterns to allow for the architecture, to allow for the building forms, the block structures, to calculate those numerical values. And so we're building that into this as we progress onward with the code as well. And your standards we can tie into this so that there's mathematical reasoning behind why these standards are. Removing arbitrary elements from the codes is extremely important. And so we're trying to do that and be logical. And there's going to be a series of policy conversations that come from this. These are not consultant decisions. These are going to be policy topics that you all have to discover and decide what is appropriate. What we would like to do is present them to you in a factual way so that the information that you're receiving ties back to geographically sensitive, to fiscally sustainable, timeless, authentic, and parking is one. We can change parking standards, and it impacts the way that people's income levels. And so these are very real situations that we're talking about, and fiscal viability for the development community to build this is really critical to understand current market trends versus future market trends, and how to provide future ready developments that are not constrained by current market readiness. It's extremely thoughtful as we're going through this.
you said something about fiscally sustainable for the developer, but I want to clarify when I talk about fiscally viable when I talk about fiscal sustainability, I'm talking about from the city standpoint.
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
talking about how much property tax do we collect and what services do we have to provide, and what I don't want is to have my existing citizens that are picking up the tab for new development. Development needs to pay for itself, and we need to be able to be in a position to where we're running a business and that we can stay in business with the development that we allow to continue. So when we talked about policy statesmen, we were back 2 or 3 slides. Fiscal sustainability is from the municipality standpoint.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. I just mean that the developments can be built. As we code these, that's fiscal viability, that a developer can go and make a pro forma work, that this actually can be a built building. The code should lead to fiscal sustainability on the city's perspective to ensure that. So that's part of the overall arching foundation. But building from the ground up, the product has to be fiscally viable, and that we didn't over-regulate so that it can't not be built. That's what
So if it's not fiscally viable, it's not going to get built, because they're not in the business to lose money, and I don't want to be in the business of accepting developments that cause us to lose money where we can't still be a city. So we're truly looking for a partnership. I'm not going to be signing off on any codes that aren't a win-win for both sides. So I think that's a really important part that needs to be. Council, any other comments on that?
Well, to key in on what you've just said, I mean, I don't want to put future councils in a position of throwing good money after bad. And these decisions have to have a long-term sustainability, and have to have the M&O, the maintenance and operation of something, has to be in place so that we're not encumbering the citizens of this town to spend money 15 years ago because we made a bad decision, or 15 years from now because we made a bad decision now. And that's extremely important that we be very cognizant of the fact that this is long-term and not just today.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Ennis?
There it is. As I understand it, there are cities all over the country that are having trouble affording their infrastructure upkeep. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
And one of the driving forces behind what we're doing with the code, if I'm not mistaken, is that we're trying to develop a code that will allow us to keep up this infrastructure without bankrupting the city in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That's probably exactly what y'all said. I'm just putting it in Ennis speak.
Thank you, Councilman. Sorry for interrupting, Matt. I just...
Okay. That's great. I'm glad we had that conversation. It leads us to the next slide, is decisions.
Well, there we go.
And these decisions are really critical. And everything we're doing to, as we draft these code standards, is to think through the decisions and to ensure that the one now will provide the council, the staff, and the administrators of the code. We're doing the front-end work to ensure that once it's done, it's applicable, it's administrable, it's set up to be fluid, it's predictable, yet still flexible enough to allow lots or buildings to move around on lots. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And the design rodeos and the comp plan and the boldness of the council with this vision has set forth a great framework for us to work within. The comprehensive master plan, again, at the 30,000 foot level, provides this guidance, but we need piercing clarity from the elected and appointed officials of this direction that we are trying to accomplish at this going forward. And as we go back, we continue to return back to the farm lots and the building blocks as a wonderful, timeless pattern that we've got to recode back in. And we anticipate that this being a foundational element that will be geographically sensitive in the appropriate areas, and a pattern that would be reintroduced into the community. This community has had this for a long time, these patterns. They've morphed, they've built different lot patterns over these blocks to make sure that it worked for the community at that time. And this pattern is going to continue to evolve as the market trends shift, as we change the way that we move, as we change the way that we do business. The framework that was set forth in this time frame is still applicable today, and we believe that that pattern is extremely important to get reintegrated back into these decisions. which leads us back to these policy frameworks that we would need direction on at this point.
Mayor and council, one of the things that we've talked about as staff, the attorney, and as the consultant team is the phenomenally importance of the why. Oftentimes, conversations start at the beginning, and people that are present at the time get it. And then as people change, the importance of the concepts fall by the wayside, and the why becomes the what. And you go from understanding why you do something to it becoming a check-the-box task because nobody remembers the why. And so that's problematic from an operational standpoint because policy changes every May around here. And so when we spend time and energy building these codes, my greatest fear is that the why never disappears, that we capture the why, and that it is reaffirmed every year. Every time council changes, that's an opportunity to bring out the policy and reaffirm it. Y'all do that as a matter of purpose in your budget. You've asked for your financial policies to be evaluated annually. You've asked for your procurement policies to be evaluated annually. You've asked for the council's rules and procedures to be evaluated annually. I would ask that when this gets adopted, that this too is visited annually. These are very important concepts. Much like the definition of Christmas, we all have one, they'll all be right, and they'll all be different. That's a dangerous place for staff and the city attorney to get. And so what we're asking for is for us to define the why so that we can bring this back to you, have you adopt it so that the why doesn't change. It's captured, and then every year when council changes, we bring out the policy preamble and we debate these words, these concepts. If they've changed, we amend it. If they're the same, then council can rock on and represent to the development community, to our citizens, to our customers, what the why statement of this is. And so one of the things that Matt just said is piercing clarity. And so that's where I hope we can get with these documents. And so geographically sensitive, we've talked about, and we've acknowledged that there are a lot of things that are geographically sensitive in Bastrop. They're also the very things that make us authentic Bastrop. That's the uniqueness that keeps the challenges we have with the one-size-fits-all approach. Mayor, you mentioned just a minute ago, we need clarity, we need consistency, we don't need the cut, copy, and paste. That's part of that authentic Bastrop spirit that we have. We've talked about fiscal sustainability, not only from the comp plan, we've talked about it from the legislature. We know that's important, and Mayor, I think everybody shares in the context that this has to be fiscally sustainable for the citizens. And you've said numerous times the developer builds it the first time, but the city maintains it in perpetuity, and we need to do that so that it's a win-win. The walkable piece I want to visit just a minute, because one of the things that y'all have made as a focus area for your vision statement is to be multimodal from a transportation standpoint. Not only did we hear from people that were walkable, we heard from people that were physically challenged that get around in a wheelchair. We had several people reach out to us that rely on bicycles as their transportation. And so part of the transportation piece that we need to incorporate going forward is tied to walkable. One of the things that was on your map were these circles. And one of the things that you didn't mention that you might talk about is the quarter-mile live, work, and play, and why that's phenomenally important to walkable.
Yes, ma'am. So essentially, we will walk about 5 minutes. It's a quarter of a mile. And the idea with these designs was to provide a variety of services, a variety of housing types within that quarter mile. So that you may have your office your third place, your hangout place, whatever that may be, in a walkable, close proximity. And so the idea throughout these concepts was to integrate that live, work, and play, recreate type of lifestyle into the possibilities. You have it in your downtown currently, and you've got a variety of housing types in your downtown currently that have access to services, whether it be, a place to, go shop or whatever the case may be. But in close proximity and laying them out in a short distance will make it to where people will walk.
And so I wanted to make that connection point, because when we talk about multimodal and we say walkable, that's not at the exclusion of the automobile. That really is a different term for multimodal. And we could take walkable and make multiple modal. That means I can walk. That means if I'm in a wheelchair, I can roll. If that means I ride a bike, I have that option. It also means that the automobile is welcome. It's just not the most important thing. And I think that that's important that we really define that. And then the end game is timeless. And I think that you get timeless because it is multimodal. And that means as transportation methods change, this code is flexible. Authentic is part of that timeless, because authentic really, it's genuine. It's not counterfeit. It just means it's the real deal. So for us to be Bastrop, we can go back to our very roots. Fiscal sustainability, we've talked about. Geographically sensitive, we've talked about. So I'm really hammering this because we're going to bring back a document and ask you to adopt it. It's going to serve two purposes. It is the foundation by which everything we bring forward and debate publicly has to measure up. So if we bring you something that isn't geographically sensitive, isn't fiscally sustainable, isn't authentic, isn't walkable, isn't timeless, then the question should be, why are you bringing this to us? So it's the why, if you will. That's also then going to be worked into the policy preamble. So tonight's discussion is as fundamental, as important as any other decision y'all will make going forward. So my question is, have we captured the essence? Have we talked about this with some clarity so that when we bring this back to you, you will see it? Or is there something else that needs to be on this list that's important to you? Because we have read the comp plan forward and backwards. The concepts that we went into this believing were true from the comp plan have been validated at the code rodeo, the design rodeo. The consistency that we heard from our citizens was impressive. But now would be the time, if we've missed anything, if we haven't heard you, we really would like to hear you tonight.
Councilmember Jones?
So to be clear, throughout this whole process, we've got, 1,200 to 1,400 people have been involved in this process.
Going back to the comp plan, yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
absolutely. And so the council's heard those people, and we've taken it very seriously, and all of us have brought our unique positions to the table, and we're applying that through exactly what you're outlining here. And what I've heard is exactly what we have voiced as a council. So I'm very anxious to hear or to see what you're going to bring back to us for specifically setting policy to accomplish what it is that we've charged.
Councilmember Ennis?
This definitely embodies the impetus behind our these particular points. Exemplify how we got started on this journey. So I think you've done a good job of capturing it. I don't think there's so many things so many pieces that kind of go off of each one of these phrases that we could sit here all night and talk about them, but they capture the essence of each one of those subjects.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yeah, we've been very clear on in identifying the what and why. We've charged staff and through the staff, our consultants, to come up with a when and hows. It's very, very bold, but we need to address the cause and quit addressing the effects that are out there, because we keep addressing the effects and putting this patchwork together rather than creating this comprehensive process that we need to put in place to move the city forward and manage the growth that is coming. So,
Councilmember Rogers?
Well, this has definitely been a process, we started back in July or June or May or whichever, and I'm really excited to see the first solid step coming to us next council. Get started.
Okay, I have a couple of comments. One, there were several times you were like, I wish we could zoom in on this. We don't have this presentation, so it would be great if it would be added to the packet, because I know there's folks at home that it's hard to see those pictures, so I'd like everyone to be able to see things, so if they have questions, they can reach out to us, so I'd like to have the presentation available. For me, personally, I'd like you guys to visit a little bit about, or consider, and we can talk about it when we vote next time, the walkable versus the multimodal. In our goals, we were very specific that it was multimodal, that it wasn't just walkable. So I'm kind of leaning towards the multimodal, and I like the fact that that doesn't exclude the car, because some of us are never ever going to give up our car, and so we shouldn't be saying like, oh, if you move to Bastrop, you can't have a car. That's not what we're saying. So I think multimodal might have some more clarity. And then I'm hoping that these are the best regulations, since sliced bread, but I also know that they're not going to be etched in stone like Moses brought the tablets down. And I want part of the process, if council is going to be looking at this annually, I really want to make sure that we utilize the dedicated folks we have on planning and zoning and get their input of, well, you guys thought this was a great idea, but we're the ones that had to deal with the consequences of some of that, and we have this input. So those folks have a perspective that we don't have, and it's an important perspective. And we talked about 1,200 people participating in the comp plan. Well, those 9 people are there by charter. It's not an accident that there's 9. That's in our Bastrop charter. They meet monthly, if not more, and I want to make sure that they're a key part of not only coming up with the code, but after we have the code. It's great to have a consultant to help us come up with it, but we've got to live with it, and they're going to be a part of making sure that we are taking community input and making those revisions. Councilmember Jones?
So just keeping the code relevant with review and sort of like in the trenches input is what we're looking at, is what I think I'm hearing you say with planning and zoning. Absolutely.
I just think they have a really unique perspective that I don't want to get lost in all of this. So, is that what you needed?
Yes, and I really like Councilmember Jones's comment about keeping codes relevant. What happens oftentimes in municipalities, it's happened here and it happens everywhere, is you pass a code, you're so grateful that it's done, you just don't wag it out again.
You don't want to talk about it.
And then it becomes this conflict that you have to manage. So I really like the keeping the code relevant, and we'll work that into the policy document, because that's an important charge that P&Z can do. That annual review by council keeps this code relevant, and when you do that, you're managing the conflict when it is an issue and not a conflict. And oftentimes issues become conflicts because you don't make them relevant. You kick the can down the street, and then all of a sudden it's just one too many, and you never know when that one too many is going to happen. That's what causes people to run for council. It's a single issue. They get that resolved and then they're satisfied. But the challenge that we're going to see in the coming days is, in order for all of this to not be in conflict, there's interconnectivity. And you can't change one thing without changing 14 others. So by keeping the code relevant and having that holistic conversation, these are key components that I think will help do the very thing you want long term. And we will definitely put that in the statement we bring back to you.
Great. So the presentation will be available for the public soon. I know it'll take us a while to get it up online. And then whatever you guys do come up with, my understanding how we normally do this is talk about it in work session, and then it'll be an item for individual consideration, which means it'll be posted with the packet, which the community will have an opportunity to read it and review it and make comments if they choose before we. Yes, and Councilmember Jones is saying please reach out with a phone call from something you've seen tonight or once you review the packet, and share your opinions, because that's what we're wanting to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you.
Council, it's 7:52. Are you okay? Can we keep going, or do we need a break? All right, I heard giddy up, so we're going to keep going. We are moving on to, we do not have any staff and board reports, so we are on citizens' comments. And the first person I have signed up is Steve Beard. Mr. Beard, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Steve Beard. I am the principal member of Pine Forest Investment Group, and I want to make a comment initially regarding City Manager Humble's comments at the first. This controversy is not over. Let me say that again. It is not over. All the Supreme Court did was deny a petition for review and did not alter what the Court of Appeals had said. In the packet I gave you, look at document number 3, page 24 and 25, it states that by disposing of TOMA counterclaims without notice, evidence, or argument, the trial court erroneously signed an order. The last sentence, the developer has shown the court erred in disposing of the TOMA's claims. We reverse that and remand to the trial court for further proceedings. Those proceedings will probably start in June, July. They will involve a year or 2 years of depositions. We intend to take the deposition, which we were denied originally, as stated that was wrong. We intend to take the depositions of everyone on the school board, everyone on this council, and everyone as a part of the Commissioner's Court, and find out what really went on at this time. For this reason, do we really want to spend another 2 or 3 years fooling with this? We don't. We are offering you $2.5 million to solve this problem. Sell the lots. 450 lots at $4,000 apiece is $1.8 million, and another $2,000 apiece on the only 350 billable lots, and go away. You've spent over $1 million in 4 years. You have nothing to show for it. We have a developer, as you all are aware, Hunt Corporation. They're standing in the wings to develop. We have the money. We've always been said we don't have any money. Call my banker. His name is attached. He'll tell you we can fund what we want to do. Hunt will take over the development. We will not be the developer. There's been a lot of controversy on who we are and whatever. But we all need to move forward. I don't think this has been going on since May of 15, and it may very well go on another 2 or 3 years. To say that this is over is wrong. It is not over. Let's settle it, at least get together and talk about it. I brought this to you all several months ago, and I assumed everybody waited and said, well, they're not going to win, they're going to go away, et cetera, et cetera. But we're not going away. Our lawyer on the TOMA matter wrote the paper. I urge you to consider getting a group. I'll be glad to talk to anybody. I'm not trying to go around your lawyers, visit with Bundren, visit with the judge. But you all need to understand you're letting the 8%er, the county, control the other 92%. That's not where you want to be. Please consider it. Please look at what we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beard. The next person we have signed up to speak is Cheryl Lee. Ms. Lee, you'll have 3 minutes. Oh, no, it doesn't start till you get here. We'll give you time.
Good evening, Mayor, City Manager, and council members, and members of the community. I come this evening in hopes of conveying to you ongoing concerns I and members of my community have about the opening of Delgado Park, located at the corner of Laurel and Water Street, and more specifically right behind my home. After speaking with others in my community, I found that we share the same concerns regarding safety in our neighborhood since the establishment of this park. Early on, I communicated concerns about the park being directly behind my home with officials in the city's Public Works Department, Parks and Recreation, and the Chief of Police, all of which were extremely nice, kept an open line of communication with me, and did what they could to address my concerns. And I am thankful for their willingness to listen. At this time, however, after speaking with others in my neighborhood, I feel the time has come for me to bring my concern to council. The road leading to the park was open to the public before the park was even open and before the playscape was constructed. There were multiple occasions where cars would drive up the road just out of curiosity, I guess, into the field and drive in circles behind my home. After the playscape was constructed and before the park was open, there were numerous occasions where unknown persons could be heard in the field after 11 p.m. and as late as 1 a.m. On one occasion, I contacted police, and officers arrived an hour later, very concerned, but but by then the individuals had left. I was advised by the officials mentioned previously that completion of the park would include lighting, a privacy fence along the back of my fence for security and noise control, and that a gate of sorts would be placed at the entrance of the road to the park at Laurel to prevent entry during closed hours. The lighting was eventually added, however, the gate was not placed at the entry of the road as stated, and rather at the entry of the park, and to this day has never been secured after hours, nor has the privacy fence been built. Since the opening of the park, naturally more people frequent our community. Most are youth coming to play with parents or teenagers walking and riding their bikes and skateboards just hanging out. However, I have witnessed cars pull into the park with no one exiting the vehicle. I have seen cars park and unknowns walk up alongside my home on foot to meet these vehicles, some lingering for just moments and others for longer periods of time, never enjoying the park. On one occasion, a vehicle pulled in, and moments later, a male walked up alongside my home to the car. I became suspicious of what was happening and began taking pictures. Once the male got into the car, it quickly exited the park and stopped further down Water Street. Still no one exited the car. Moments later, the vehicle circled back to the park to find me still sitting on my back porch and made the decision to turn left again down Water. My concern is also for children playing on the playscape. On multiple occasions after the sun goes down, I witnessed cars pulling up to the field to the playscape and using their headlights for their children to play. The current lighting is not sufficient for the playscape or swings after the sun goes down. This could result in danger to the child and liability to the city if someone gets hurt. Finally, I'm concerned about the damage to Laurel Street that occurred as a result of the heavy equipment frequenting our neighborhood to build the park. The road is badly damaged, and by all accounts, there has been no activity to repair it. There is a level of crime and danger that comes with having a park as part of the community, especially behind residential homes. Parks are difficult to patrol and obviously hard to monitor and secure throughout the day and especially at night. The city has a duty, however, to ensure that I am safe and my community is safe. The city has a duty to ensure my community is not faced with illicit sexual activity, panhandling, drug and alcohol use, theft, and danger to our property as a result of building this park behind our homes. I am asking council to consider, discuss, and implement measures to keep our community safe. In an effort to protect my property and the property of my neighbors to the left of my home, I have asked that a privacy fence be extended from the park gates to Laurel Street on both sides. I'm also asking the council to take necessary steps to assess the lighting situation around the playscape in an effort to ensure the safety of the children playing after dark. I am asking that due to the lack of patrol and policing of the park, a surveillance system be installed so that in the event inappropriate activity occurs, there is a way to identify those involved. If nothing else, motion lights for after hours. And finally, I ask for some consideration regarding the damage to Laurel Street and that a plan be established to repair the road. I thank you for your time this evening and hope this message is received in the heartfelt manner it was intended.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lee. It looks like you're reading from something, and if you would give that to the city secretary, I would appreciate that. It's not on the agenda, so we can't have an interactive discussion about that, but I am quite confident that the city manager will read it, call you if she has questions, and then bring back to council if there's anything council needs to do. Thank you so much. All right, we're moving on to item 11. We're on the consent agenda. Council, you have in front of you a single piece of paper that has a yellow highlight. The January 24th Board and Commission orientation, those meeting minutes accidentally left out a line, and we had 5 people that weren't going to get credit for being there, so that's the only change. It's just a minor change, but that document is in front of you. So that minor revision is on 11A. There are 2 items on the consent agenda, 11A and 11B. Does anybody want anything pulled? Does anyone in the audience want a consent agenda pulled? All right, Madam Secretary, if you'll please read the consent agenda.
The consent agenda reads as follows. 11A, consider action to approve City Council minutes from the January 22nd, 2019 regular meeting and January 24th, 2019 Board and Commission orientation. 11B, consider action to approve resolution number R-2019-16 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, adopting various policies and procedures required in conformity with the Civil Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act as shown in Exhibit A, required under the Texas Community Development Block Grant Contract Number 7218019 through the Texas Department of Agriculture, providing for a repealing clause and establishing an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Madam Mayor, move to approve consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion to approve from Mayor Pro Tem Nelson, a second from Councilmember Ennis. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously 4-0. Thank you, Council. We're now moving to items for individual consideration. Item 12A, consider action and approve resolution number R 2019-20 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, making determinations regarding certain project-specific exceptions and or exemptions as provided by Emergency Ordinance 2018-1, Section 8, and Emergency Ordinance 2018-2, Section 7. Ms. Bills, Council, you have before you item 12A, and are we at 5 tonight? 5 or 6? 6. Council, I have always promised that you'll have an opportunity to review. Has everyone had sufficient time to review? Are you prepared for Ms. Bills to continue, or do we need to take a moment for you to have an opportunity to review the material? We're good? Are we good on this side? All right. Ms. Bills, it's all yours.
Good evening. So yeah, we do have 6 items tonight, and just as a refresher for council and then the audience, just kind of go over for exemptions. There are 4 different methods in the moratorium ordinance. For methods for addressing drainage, the process is to go through the first being a planned development district, which is within the city limits because it's a zoning action. And this helps create a development plan that addresses subdivision layout and the development standards that would assist in a drainage design for a new development. There's alternative design standards. This would be applied during a site plan or a plat, subdivision plat submission to make sure the drainage specific standards are being applied. The third is an ETJ agreement, and this is for developments in the extraterritorial jurisdiction to address subdivision layout and development standards because you can't apply zoning in the ETJ. And the fourth is a waiver, and this is the one you guys have most commonly seen to date, and this is for projects that create either a negligible increase that have minimal drainage infrastructure upgrades needed, or they have to provide all the drainage system upgrades if it's going to cause an issue downstream. So those are the 4 methods of processing exemptions. So tonight we have 6 on the agenda. The first 5 are waivers. They're relatively small projects, sheds or new houses. But the 6th is actually a new section of the Colony Mud. So the first request is for 128 Tonkawa Hills Drive. This is an existing single-family lot.
Ms. Bills, is it 128 or 123? In our material, it's...
They've got multiple addresses because they have multiple lots out there. So the house, I think, is 128, and the lot is 123.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Sorry for the
He thought you were just testing to see if we were really reading the material.
Sometimes I need it.
You passed the test, Councilmember Ennis. You caught it, so did good.
So this is an existing single-family structure, and they're proposing to do a new 1,000-square-foot shed kind of barn on the property. They have a total of 5.19 acres. This would increase the impervious cover on their lots by 0.4%, with an increase in runoff of 0.8 cubic feet per second. To give you an idea where this location is, this is on the very edge of our city limits on the northeast side of the property off of Hoffman Road. This is an older subdivision that was originally platted in the early 60s. It's zoned agricultural open space, so a standalone barn is allowed in that zoning district on property. The drainage study submitted by the engineer shows the drainage pattern goes to, the subdivision was actually created around an existing pond, so this drainage will convey to the existing pond that's in the middle of all the lots in that area.
Council, I'll remind you that we take votes on these individually. Thank you, Ms. Bills, for the presentation. Do we have any questions for Ms. Bills? I have a motion to approve from Councilmember Jones.
Second.
I have a second from Mayor Pro Tem Nelson. Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Thank you, Council. The motion passes 4-0. So 123 Tonkawa or 128 Tonkawa, but this material is approved. Let's go to the next one. I think we're at 149 Mahalo.
Well, yeah, so this is in Teton Village. There's an existing single-family structure. The property currently has 3 lots that they've already built over the lot lines in a previous era. The proposed project is a 384 square foot shed. The total lot that they have is over almost 31,000 square feet. So the increase in impervious cover will be 1.2%. And because of the perviousness of the soil in that area, there's no increase in runoff to be expected at this location.
Move to approve. I have a motion to approve from Councilmember Jones.
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Ennis. Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0. 149 Mahalo is approved. We're now on 110 Corporate.
Yes. So this is an existing commercial site. There's an existing building on the site already. They're proposing to do a 432 square foot storage building on the site for the commercial use. The lot size is 8,712 square feet. They're actually proposing to remove some of the impervious cover on the site that's not needed. So the new structure will actually go over some impervious cover, so there'll be less impervious cover overall in the end, but it does change the drainage pattern on the lot. So that's why they had to look at how the drainage would be impacted.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve from Councilmember Jones. I have a second from Mayor Pro Tem Nelson. Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Motion passes 4-0. 110 Corporate Drive is approved.
The next request is on Ori Court. It's 2 lots. They're proposing to do a plat to combine the 2 lots into one and then build one single-family structure on
Okay, I'm going
the
to
2
ask
lots.
Councilmember Ennis this question. Our stuff says Hawaii.
So this was a street name. I asked this of our addressing coordinator. That was the street name that was changed last year during the renaming when there were 3 streets in Teton Village in the city limits that had similar sounding names to other parts of Teton. So the new name is Ori Court. The surveyor's using an old map he has.
Okay.
So.
Just want to make sure that people know where they live. Keep going.
Yes. So the current use on the site is vacant. It's undeveloped. It's 2 single-family 9 zone lots. The project on this is that they're going to do an amending plat and then build a new home. The lot size with the 2 combined is 24,524 square feet. The runoff increase is proposed to be none because of the way they're going to situate. The lot is flat at the top and then drains to the south. So there'll be sufficient absorption in the lot to the south.
Move to approve. I have a motion to approve from Councilmember Jones.
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Ennis. Is there any further questions or discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0 and Ori Court is approved. We're on Piney Ridge Drive.
So this is the last of the waivers. This is 118 Piney Ridge Drive, and that address all might not be quite right. Sometimes people make up addresses when there's not an address out there yet. So that's the closest one in the area. The current use is vacant, undeveloped. They're proposing to do a 3,000 square foot house. This is within the city limits. Their lot size is a little under 3 acres. The increase in impervious cover will be 2.3% on the entire lot. with a runoff increase of 0.5 cubic feet per second. But it's a fairly large lot, and it drains into what is the kind of beginning of Gills Branch.
Move to approve.
The motion to approve from Councilmember Jones.
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Rogers. Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
The motion passes 4-0. 118 Piney Ridge is approved.
And so our last one is an exemption request for an additional section of the Colony Mud. This would be section 1B. The current area is undeveloped. The project size is 133.3 acres. They're proposing a preliminary plat that'll have 370 single-family units with also additional open space and community amenities. There is a consent agreement that's been approved for this development, the original being approved in February of 2004 and most recently updated in a second amendment in August of 2017. The area you can see is, my little button's not working. So the area directly to the east is the Colony Section 1A that's currently under development. 1A is on either side of 969, and it's actively under development right now. So this would be the continuation to the west along Sam Houston Drive that'll eventually connect back to the other existing part of the Colony Mud on the west side of the property. They've submitted a full drainage study for the exemption that shows the pre and post developed conditions. You can see on this map, these are all the drainage basins that are anticipated to be affected by this development. In looking at their drainage analysis, they are using the Atlas 14 updated rainfall totals for their calculations. That's their alternative design that they're proposing. Looking at, and their engineer is here to correct me if I get any of this wrong, the maximum impervious cover over the entire site is at 37%. The property primarily drains to the north, and they will be conveying all of the drainage through a curb and gutter system to two ponds on the northern side of this section of the development. So one of the things staff looked at that, especially for these larger developments that we've kind of been looking at as we've been going through this process, is that the developer or the engineer looks at some initial assumptions, 37% site-wide, that's what they're designing their detention to. But there's nothing that stops homeowners 10 years later from paving their entire lot. You know, putting additional impervious cover to a limit that could potentially go over what those ponds were designed to handle. So one of the things staff is proposing is that as a plat note, limiting the impervious cover, what we're proposing is 55% for lots that are 45 feet or less, and then 45% for lots that are over 45 feet wide. And that's looking at some other developments in town that they generally tend to plan for about 50% impervious cover on single family. But then, of course, the entire impervious cover can't exceed 37% site wide. So that's kind of something we need to work out during the planning process to make sure that those numbers, they add up to meeting what their ponds are designed for.
Ms. Bills, has that been discussed with the...
Briefly, and Brendan can probably talk to it a little bit more, that how they actually kind of plan and design to LCRA and TCQ standards on impervious cover. I'm going to defer that to him.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Brendan McEntee. I'm an engineer with Carlson, Brigance and Turing. I guess let's talk a little bit about impervious cover. Jennifer is right. When the drainage that's in here, when we originally do a subdivision and we contemplate drainage, we make assumptions about impervious cover. So generally there's a couple different standards. The two main ones that we use are TCQ and LCRA. And they break single-family lot sizes down to minimum standards. 10,000 to 15,000 square foot is probably the most common lot. And they have average impervious covers. And those are generally around 30 to 35%. It varies if we use TCQ or LCRA. So that's generally individual single-family lots that we use when we size and we model detention systems. I did speak to city staff today about some impervious cover maximums, because I think, as staff did say, there is currently not a maximum impervious cover. There are some current maximum building coverage, but there's not maximum impervious cover. So we did talk some about that and talk whether that was something, how we would feel about that. Our overall impervious cover for the gross MUD 1B, I think with an assumed amenity center, so absent a full design on an amenity center, is sub 40%. So these impervious covers are not necessarily going to be onerous for what's contemplated for the development. That being said, we're the engineers. We're a consultant to the owner. This is a development that does have a development agreement. So certainly for the developer to agree to anything that's above and beyond that, that's something that a decision they have to make. From a design standpoint, we are below these assumptions. We're in some cases for the 45-foot lots, we're 10 or 15% below those in the design assumptions in the drainage study. So certainly we meet those maximums. To go any further, I think that will take some additional discussions more related with their attorneys as how it relates to the development agreement. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, if you've assumed 35% coverage and we say, well, it's a maximum of 45, are you saying that you've taken 45 into account when you've sized the ponds or not?
No, I'm saying we're actually less than that. Or the assumptions in the drainage study.
So have you had a chance to run through the calculations and see if you'd have to change the size
Oh, yeah,
of the
no, I
pond?
know. What I'm saying is this is more generous than we've calculated, Mayor, to be clear.
Okay.
To be crystal clear.
I thought you were telling me you were on the other side of it.
No. I mean, from, what's proposed here is the alternative design is to propose detention ponds that are based on the recently adopted Atlas 14. So those are precipitation volumes that are 25-30% greater than what has historically been used here for the last 5 or 6 decades. So this development and this drainage study at this early phase of this development, I mean, this request is made for us then to be able to proceed and submit a preliminary plan so we can then proceed through the development process. But early on, to meet the obligations of the moratorium and to meet the obligations of the alternative design, this drainage study was done. And so what's been proposed is a full model with full build-out condition of the 370 lots, with impervious cover based on TCQ. It's less than what staff has asked us if we could agree to. So certainly, I don't think that's an onerous obligation. I'm just telling you as a consultant, I can't say today at this thing that that's something that we can agree to on behalf of the developers. But I mean, we're well below that with what we assumed. And we have ponds that meet where our post-development flow is less than or equal to pre-development flow. So mitigating impacts, having a development that shaves peaks, that's something that has already been contemplated in this. And that's why we're requesting alternative design.
So process standpoint, Alan, if he can't speak for the owner, does he need to come back in 2 weeks with the owner, or do we approve it that it has to be done, or what do you recommend?
I think you have a choice, Mayor and Council. The only way this project, this application can go forward during our moratorium is through this route. And so with the alternate design standards that the property owner has suggested and agreed to, plus the condition that city staff has put on it, would allow the project to proceed through the platting and permitting process. If the applicant does not want to agree to those standards today or wants more time to think about them, then they can certainly ask that it be postponed. You as a city council can choose to postpone it, or you can choose to approve it as recommended by staff, and later the property owner can come back and say, thank you, but no thanks. But the only way for it to move forward on any sort of current time frame is through this alternate process with staff's conditions.
So with this approval with staff's conditions, if council was to approve that, they can move forward with a preliminary plat, or they can have a conversation with the owner and come back with a Plan B still in this same step, correct?
Correct.
You don't seem to be liking that.
Well, I just want to propose an alternate route, just to make sure that because this is a new process for everybody, just to make sure I understand. What we're requesting tonight is approval for the exemption. And with the exemption, the next step is hopefully the next planning and zoning we're going to submit for a preliminary. That preliminary has to go through its process. If you want to add a preliminary plat note, that would be the appropriate mechanism and vehicle and process to do that, not the exemption. The exemption today, as I appreciate it, Mayor and Council, the exemption today is, does this project meet the hurdle that's within the moratorium to allow it to proceed? I think we still have multiple steps in the entitlement process. You know, we still have to go through a preliminary plat, we still have to go through construction plans, we still have to go through final plats. So we're trying to get to step one with this, just to be clear.
And I would agree to that, but those preliminary plats and what follows are going to be evaluated in light of what the city council approves tonight.
Absolutely.
If you approve anything.
Because you're wasting your time if council is inclined, because we have not voted, if council is inclined to take staff's recommendation, you're not going to bring back a preliminary plat that doesn't meet that.
Well, and conversely, Mayor, I guess, you know, we like to proceed. I mean, there's been some, you know, we've all stood back a little bit, kind of let the smoke clear. So it's not advantageous to me to have another delay. So I guess I would prefer to proceed with the exemption and have these other things moved down. If that's not an option, I guess I would rather leave with the approvals I can get with staff recommendations, recognizing that if my client doesn't agree with that, the project's dead. And candidly, that means we'll just have to revisit.
You'll have to come back. I'll give council an opportunity to speak, but I doubt they will not be going with staff recommendations. That's the point of it. Jerry, is there anything that you want to add that we need to know about from your perspective before council starts asking other questions?
No, I had asked Mr. McEntee to come in to explain his position because we weren't real clear on it, and that's why he's here tonight.
Appreciate you being here.
May.
So are you comfortable with what you're hearing?
I am comfortable with what I'm hearing.
So you stand behind staff recommendation as we're seeing on the screens now?
Yes, ma'am.
Council, do you have any questions for either the design engineer or, I see a couple people going forward, Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
I do. Are the drainage ponds and the outlets, are they wholly within the development property?
Yes, the post-development, we're retaining within the property. So when we measure and we evaluate, our drainage basins might evaluate a confluence of the creek, but state law requires us, and the design requires us to restore back to the pre-development rate at our property line.
Okay, and a follow-up to that, in the outlet pipes, are they going to be built for the total build-out of the development? Will they be adequate to handle that flow from the total build-out?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jones?
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. One is, I think in the process of this being heard, y'all dealt with adjacent property owners, am I correct? Did y'all consider some issues that were brought up by adjacent property owners? I mean, and this might have been a few months back.
Now, I remember on 1A, 2A, we had an adjoiner on 969 who I met with, and that issue, I believe, has been resolved. If that's the...
Right, and that's what I'm talking about. So
I think you were talking about. I know we met with somebody, I recall, that's a year or so ago, after 1A, 2A.
It's been not a few months, it's been a year. So, I mean, I want to point out that y'all have met with some adjacent property owners, but the other question I just would like to ask, if you might know about this, are y'all interested in looking at a different street light layout that might promote a grid system, which we are finding is perhaps a more economical way to go, it's a route that's perhaps easier to maintain? Is there any sort of interest, do you know, from the owners to even consider that?
Are they set?
No, I don't believe the owners are set. That was multiple levels of questions in there. There is one of the staff's comments about street grids and cul-de-sacs. I might be the odd man out from a land development standpoint. That there are some things that I respond to a little bit differently with some of the new urbanism and some of the TND. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to talk through some of these cul-de-sac issues and some of what's allowable, what's beneficial, what's reasonable. But I think as far as streetlight grids, things like that, we're certainly amenable to discuss that. I don't believe that any set pattern has been agreed to, and we're still early enough in the development that, now would be the time to have that discussion, Councilman.
Councilmember Jones, were you done, or?
Unless there's more discussion, I would like to move to approve as recommended by staff.
And I appreciate you being willing to talk about those grid systems, and I realize that you're in the ETJ, but it's worth having the conversation and making sure that we make the neighborhoods as good as we can for you, for your client, for our future citizens as well. So you made a motion, have a motion from Councilmember Jones to approve with staff recommendations.
I'll second.
I have a second from Councilmember Rogers. Is there any further questions or discussions for this alternative design standard? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
No.
The vote passes 3-1, and that is the last of our items on 12A. I've had a request that we take a quick 5-minute break. I believe there are people in the audience for items 12B, C, D, E, H, and I. I will be going in that order. If you are in the audience and you are, and I didn't call out your item, please let me know. I know you guys enjoy being with us, but maybe not quite as much, and we'll try to get you out of here as soon as we can. So it is 8:30, and we are now going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to try to rock and roll through here. I am on item 12B, consider action to approve resolution number R 2019-21 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, approving task order number 2 with Walker Partners for design, bid, services, inspections, and construction administrative services related to street maintenance and rehabilitation for the grand total of $71,000. This says 500, but it's $71,700 as shown in Exhibit A of the Engineering Services Agreement, authorizing the city manager to execute all necessary documents, providing for a repealing clause, and establishing an effective date. Mr. Jobe.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a quick note: the resolution actually does say the $71,700 amount, so you'll be approving the correct amount. So what you have before you tonight is a resolution. If you remember, early on in the budget year, we started putting together a street maintenance program. We funded year 1 and year 2. Old Austin Highway is one of the busiest streets we have in our entire network. It benefits the entire community. This resolution is for the engineering for this project, and it's part of our rehabilitation of year 1, and the amount for $71,700 that's being proposed to award to Walker Partners, which we have 3 gentlemen here tonight. If you have any questions, will be to start that project.
Council, do you have any further questions for Mr. Jobe? One of the things I appreciated was it looks like this is one of our first standard engineering services agreement documents that we're approving as a part of this contract.
That is correct.
And in the contract, it references Exhibit A and B, and I think there's really only an A. Do you know?
The reason this one came to you is because it was over $50,000. The other exhibits are under, and they don't require coming to council. They're all budgeted, but they are not.
Okay. Well, don't tell me to look for Exhibit B if there's not an Exhibit B.
I can do that.
And these agreements just really need to say exhibits, because over 5 years, there'll be multiple.
Makes me happy. My little, you know how I am. It makes me crazy because I think I've lost something somewhere. So.
I am not confused. Thank you.
Okay. So, and for clarification, council, the only task orders that'll come back to us is if they're over the city manager's signature. So we may approve like 1, 4, and 27 or whatever, but that's the intent. But it is covered overall by the engineering services document. Am I understanding that correctly,
Yes, ma'am,
Mr. Joe?
that's correct.
Okay.
And this is an important contract. As Trey said, not only is it Old Austin Highway, but there are multiple schools along Old Austin Highway. So Walker Partners is working very hard so that when school is out, there's a contractor ready to reconstruct rehabilitate Old Austin and have that complete before school starts back.
Thank you, City Manager. That was my next question, was the timing on this is really critical.
Yes, ma'am.
The schools is one thing because it's because of the number of schools, but also the assisted living and the nursing homes that are along there. It's going to be really important that they always have access because we never know when emergencies might happen, and I'm sure Walker will take care of that with the contractor.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am, and not only is it assisted living, but it is HEB, Starbucks, and First National Bank.
That's correct.
We are
a lot
not
of people,
confused
a
on the
lot of people
importance.
travel that road.
Yeah, those are phone calls we don't want to get because you don't want us to get those.
It is.
So.
It is good that this is a 3-lane road. It'll allow us to have better traffic flow during construction.
Well, and I feel confident with Walker Partners that they've tackled these kind of things before. I'm glad to see that they'll be running this. Yes. So, Council?
Madam Mayor, move to approve Resolution R2019-21.
Okay, I have a motion. If I can get a second, we can have a conversation.
Second.
I have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Nelson. I have a second from Councilmember Rogers. Councilmember Ennis?
I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to this council's commitment to the infrastructure of our city. And this is, as I understand it, the first time we've had a comprehensive study of our streets.
Yes, sir.
And we're taking the streets in condition. I mean, we've got it all mapped out, right?
Yes, sir,
We had
that is
that
correct.
presentation in the spring.
Yes, sir.
And this is the first step.
Yes, we will bring you back years 3 through 5 in this next budget cycle.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ennis, for reminding all of us about the pavement condition index and that this isn't, we aren't throwing darts at a board. There is a scientific methodology for why we're doing the streets that we're doing. I appreciate you bringing that to everyone's attention. Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
The motion passes 3-0. We are now moving on to item 12C. Council, you had before you resolution number 2019-04. There's been some clarification for the whereases in that resolution, and I hope you've had an opportunity to review that, and I'll bring that to your attention as we go to item 12C. Consider action to approve resolution number R 2019-04 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, awarding a contract to construct a 250,000-gallon elevated storage tank, interior and exterior coatings, lines, valves, and associated appurtenances to landmark structures of Fort Worth, Texas, in the amount of $1,490,800 as Exhibit A, authorizing the city manager to execute all necessary documents, providing for a repealing clause, and establishing an effective date. Mr. Job.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll start where you left off with the changes in the resolution. It was actually to clarify, and we'll go through here in the staff report in a minute, but it's one project that we originally started, but it's 2 separate contracts, one for the elevated storage tank and one for the ground storage tank. So what we did was change the language in the resolution to clarify that. Made a little simpler to find. So I'll bring you back in history a little bit. In 2016, we actually entered into a contract with BEFCO for 2 separate projects. One was for a 16-inch water line that basically connected you from Popeyes to Sonic, and then from Hunter's Crossing to the location you see on the star there on the map for the elevated storage site. We then sent a variance to TCEQ, which is why this has been taking so long. We sent a variance to TCEQ for a glass line bolted elevated storage tank, which is something they don't have in the state of Texas. We found out about 9 months later they denied that variance since the project was needed and we completed the 16-inch water line. We went ahead and moved forward with the traditional steel.
But let's be clear why we asked for the variance. It was fiscally sustainable from a maintenance, it didn't require maintenance, and it's easily stackable and addable as we needed storage, so it made complete sense.
That is
but
correct.
It's not in the TCEQ rule book.
That's correct.
So they denied the variance.
That is correct. It's easier to expand and it does not require to be repainted.
But at least it took them 9 months to figure out it wasn't in the rule book, but that's tacky,
correct.
so let's move on.
Right. So I just wanted to explain the gap in the last 2 years while we're still on this project. So here we are again. We're back at the elevated storage tank. We decided to go with Landmark, which we have a representative here who's happy to speak if we have any questions. But also, we're going to be clear, this is a 500,000 gallons of storage that is added to the overall water system, but the elevated tank itself is 250,000. And that's what you're approving tonight is the resolution to enter the contract with Landmark Structures to take care of just the elevated storage tank. And the next item, we'll talk about the ground storage tank.
I appreciated getting the full bid tab, and it was nice to see that of the three, because not everybody builds these. This is and it was nice to see the Texas firm was the low bidder. So
Yes.
appreciate keeping
Yes.
it in the state.
And if you'll notice the composite tank, which the concrete base, which is, I think, much more attractive, and that's the direction we headed. So.
Great, Councilmember Ennis.
And just for clarity, this contract is to construct the tank, not just construction.
That is correct. This is to award the contract to Landmark to build this tank for the 1.4 million and some change.
Bevco will supervise this contract and the next one.
That's correct.
As a part of a contract that they already have.
Yes, from
In
2000
2016.
Yes, that's correct.
Any other questions or clarifications?
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve from Mayor Pro Tem Nelson.
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Ennis. Is there any further question or discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
The motion passes 3-0. We're now going on to item 12D. And this is the other half of the project. And Council, you have Resolution 2019-08 at your place, and it again clarified some of the whereases to make it clear that it's two projects, but we're approving one contract for the elevated, and then this is the contract for the ground storage.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. The main changes to the speech that I just gave a moment ago is the
Okay,
contractor.
I got to read the deal. I didn't.
I understand.
Okay, consider action to approve resolution number R 2019-08 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, awarding a contract to construct a coated bolted ground storage tank with concrete footing, ring wall, and gravel select fill foundation to TTE LLC of Spicewood, Texas, in the amount of $1,142,100, authorizing the city manager to execute all necessary documents, providing for a repealing clause, and establishing an effective date. Mr. Jobe.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So again, to clarify, we went through a little bit of the history on the last item, but I do want to point out the benefit of this ground storage tank. The recent contract, wholesale water agreement that we put in with Aqua, it will allow us to take water from another location if need be, elevate it to the tower, provide pressure, fire flow during times of emergency, things of that nature. And again, to clarify what the mayor, I'll follow up on that. This resolution is one project, two separate contracts, one for groundwater storage, one for elevated, and the resolution that we have here is to award this contract to TTE LLC. Any questions?
So I want to make this point because we've talked about the importance of infrastructure this evening. What Trey is talking about is significant redundancy. We've entered into a partnership with Aqua, and if we were to have something happen to our water supply or something to a part of our system, we will have a connection point at this tower with Aqua, would be able to take water from them and pressurize our system.
Entire
And that,
system.
I'm sorry?
The entire system.
The entire system. And so there have been times, I think back to 2011, when there was concern about not being able to provide water because we didn't have access to additional water. So this is a huge victory for redundancy and being able to provide non-negotiable services always. So
Yes.
this is a very important piece of infrastructure being added to our system. So this is a huge victory for our water system this evening.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. We don't think providing water is an option, so we want to make sure it's there all the time.
Council, any further questions for Mr. Joe?
I move to approve.
I have a motion to approve from Councilmember Rogers.
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Ennis. Is there any further discussion?
Couple of comments, Madam Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
First of all, I really appreciate the side-by-side comparison that you did with that, to echo the mayor's earlier comments. And second of all, to recognize that this is our ongoing process and our commitment to improve the infrastructure of this community. And I really appreciate the time and effort that's been put into doing such a positive work plan and consistent with our priority sections of of the work plan. Kudos to y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and I can honestly say you made some great decisions, and we wouldn't be able to get here without your help. So everybody deserves a round of applause on that one.
No, they won't get one. Okay, so is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll. Everybody's tired. They're all looking at me with like, move along, move along. Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Measure passes 3-0, and in all seriousness, truly, we appreciate all the efforts. It's the right thing to do, and yay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rogers giving you a hand. We're moving on to item 12E. Mayor Pro Tem Nelson wants you to know it's huge, huge. Hold public hearing and consider action to approve resolution number R 2019-14 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, granting a variance to the Bastrop Code of Ordinances, Article 4.02.005, sale of alcoholic beverages, separation requirements from church, public or private school or public hospital on property located at 1507 Chestnut Street within the city limits of Bastrop, Texas, as shown in Exhibit A, providing for a repealing clause and establishing an effective date. Lot of movement at 1507 Chestnut. Everyone knows where Stem and Stone's going to be. Miss
Yes, it is right down the road. All right. Location is 1507 Chestnut Street. It is just down the street towards 95 here from City Hall. This is going to be the Stem and Stone restaurant. All right, alcohol sales must be allowed by zoning district, be in a permitted location, and must meet the separation requirements. So this location is in the Civic Cultural Arts zone of the Form-Based Code, which does allow alcohol sales. It is a permitted location, but it does not meet the 300 feet separation requirements, and so we are here tonight for a variance. All right, it does not meet the separation requirements specifically from Emile Elementary School property as measured from property line to property line. State law does give you, as City Council, the ability to grant variances from those separation requirements. This location is directly across Pine Street from Emile Elementary School property. There is Pine Street as well as a channelized portion of Gills Branch there. The variance approval criteria reads as follows. You all should all be pretty familiar with those at this point, so I'm not going to read through every single one of them.
Thank you, Ms. Land. You've taught us well. We know them.
Yes. All right, so this location is along a civic and commercial corridor near State Highway 95. The use is allowed. The property is separated by the school from a channelized portion of Gills Branch as well as Pine Street. At this time, no driveway access onto Pine Street is currently planned. That would require a pretty substantial bridge, and that is not in the works right now. They are anticipating serving beer and wine at the Farm to Table restaurant, and obviously permits through the planning department are still required and ongoing. Recent area variances include Casa Chapala, which is a couple properties over on the corner of Chestnut and 95, after that Siam Thai, and then Casa Chapala is across 95. To date, we have not received any public comments for or against. Any questions?
Any further questions for Ms. Land?
The entrance will be off of, to the property will be Chestnut, just like it is now, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have to officially open the public hearing. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone signed up to speak? I'm officially closing the public hearing. Council, I'm happy to entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Councilmember Ennis.
Second.
And second from Councilmember Rogers. Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
The measure is approved 3-0. Congratulations and welcome to town, Stem and Stone. All right, we're going to skip 12F because no one in the audience is here. We're also going to skip 12G, and that is going to bring up item 12H. Hold public hearing and consider action to approve resolution number R 2019-17 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, supporting an application for 2019 housing tax credits by Riverwood Commons LP for the development located at 440 Old Austin Highway named Riverwood Commons 2 to the Texas Department of Housing Community Affairs to develop affordable rental senior housing within the city limits of Bastrop, Texas, authorizing the mayor to certify resolutions to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, authorizing the city manager to waive $250 in development fees, and providing for an effective date. Ms. Bills.
Good evening. So this request is for the city to support the developer's application to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs for the 9% housing tax credit program. This project would be a second phase to the Riverwood Commons apartment with 36 units that located at 440 Old Austin Highway that was previously built with 9% housing tax credits. The application cycle for the 9%, this is a competitive process. They have a pre-application period in the middle of January that concludes with the formal applications having to be made with all the support resolutions by March 1st. The location of the second phase is behind the existing apartments along Old Austin Highway. The 9% tax credits are a program that's allocated yearly. It's a competitive process that Bastrop, projects in Bastrop compete against the nine other counties in the Central Texas region that qualify in the rural category, but only one project will be funded. The 9% program, there's two different programs within the housing tax credit program. The 9% is the competitive. The most recent complex over in Hunter's Crossing was funded with 4% tax credits. The 9% provide a better source of funding and allows for some additional affordability within their product. They're proposing to do a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms because this will be a senior apartment, so you usually, it's restricted to people that are 55 years of age and older. There tend to be a little bit smaller units. They're showing a mix of income ranges from the 30% of area family median income all the way up to market rent. So you'll have some apartments available at all 4 of those levels.
Ms. Bills, that area median family income, isn't that out of the Austin MSA?
It is. It's out of the Austin MSA.
So it's generally substantially higher than what our ours would. Everyone's aware of that.
For a family of 4 in Austin, I think it's about $80,000 right now. So in Bastrop currently we have 4 housing tax credit properties. The first 2, Settlement Estates, Senior Housing, and then Riverwood Commons, were both developed by JES Holdings. The additional 2 were actually just approved and funded last year. Bastrop Oak Grove is actually an existing Section 8 property that's using 4% tax credits to do rehab to bring them up to modern standards. And then the Preserve at Hunter's Crossing is a new construction that was funded with 4%, so it's under construction right now. This project, if they submit the plans, there's a little bit of a lead time to find if they've gotten the funding. If we're still under the moratorium, they'll have to come into compliance with the moratorium. Staff is recommending approval, and the developer is here with a presentation if you'd like to hear from them.
Council, do you want to hear from the developer? I've met with them and they're really great, but let me officially open the public hearing.
Mayor?
Oh, Councilmember Ennis?
No, I'll save that for discussion.
So I've opened the public hearing. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone signed up to speak? I'm officially closing the public hearing. Councilmember Ennis?
I don't have any questions of the developer because the proof is already on the ground in section 1. So if it wasn't an exemplary property, I think we'd probably have a lot more questions. But my personal opinion is that it is, and that's why I'm not asking questions.
Absolutely, and it's my understanding that when the first phase was built, it was sold out before the construction was completed, and I fully expect that to happen again. And when I saw this on the agenda, I realized for several folks drive by there and they think, isn't there another part? And this is actually approving the other part. And I like how they're mirrored and it creates a courtyard for both of the buildings. So, all right.
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve from Councilmember Ennis.
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Rogers. Any further discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
All right, this is more of the paperwork-ish sort of stuff. It's somewhat of the same topic. We're moving to item 12I. Hold public hearing and consider action to approve Resolution 2019-18 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, acknowledging that Bastrop has more than 2 times the state average per capita of housing tax credit units and supporting the 2019 housing tax credit application by Riverwood Commons 2 LP for the development located at 440 Old Austin Highway named Riverwood Commons 2 to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs to develop affordable rental senior housing within the city limits of Bastrop, Texas, authorizing the mayor to certify resolutions to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, authorizing the city manager to waive $250 in development fees and providing for an effective date. Ms. Bills.
So this resolution is that the city of Bastrop currently has more than 2 times the average per capita amount of housing tax credit units within the city limits. So this is something that TDHCA requires from cities that trip that number. It gives some cities the ability to be a little pickier and choosier on what developments come into their town. Their application actually can't move forward without the 2 times resolution acknowledgement. As I said, there's 4 complexes currently in town that provide 294 units. Just kind of put it in normal numbers. In the state of Texas, there's currently 1 housing tax credit unit for every 104 people. City of Bastrop, we're at 3.88 times because we're fairly small on our population. So we have 75.5 people per tax credit unit. So we almost 4 times the amount, but we still only have 294. Typically, your county seats do tend to attract more development. So, and this is also a comparative statistic. It's not reflective of market demand, which is a required element of their application to prove that there is demand for that housing type. Staff is recommending approval.
But you're also recommending that I hold the public hearing. So I'm officially opening the public hearing. Madam Secretary, to speak. I'm officially closing the public hearing. Council, do you have any questions for Ms. Bills, or the developer is still in the audience?
Madam Mayor, move to approve Resolution R2019-18.
I have a motion to approve from Mayor Pro Tem Nelson. With a second, we can have conversation.
I guess I need a second so I can ask my question.
I have a second from Councilmember Ennis. Councilmember Ennis.
Thank you, Mayor. Does the fact that we have a plethora of tax credit units work against Riverwood's application?
No, only if the council were not to approve this resolution.
So when it gets to state, it's not necessarily an impediment?
No.
Well, and it's facts anyway,
It's
right?
facts. The market study will prove that there's a demand that they can rent those units.
Great.
And that's what they'll look at.
We are checking the box.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, with no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Nelson.
Just want to acknowledge, it's not that we don't want to hear the developer speak, but our staff has done such an outstanding job in their presentation. There's no need for you to get up, so thank you.
But we do appreciate you being here tonight, because if you hadn't, we would have had questions and then it would have been a thing. Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
The motion passes with a 3-0 vote. That is 12 ayes. So I am now, and you have stayed here, so we appreciate it, and drive safe on your way home. Council, we'll be going back to item 12F. Because I don't think I have anyone else in the audience. 12F, consider action to approve resolution number R 2019-15 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, designating the mayor, city manager, chief financial officer, and city secretary as authorized signatories for contractual documents and documents for requesting funds pertaining to the Texas Community Development Block Grant Program, contract number 7218019, as shown in Exhibit A, providing for repealing clause and establishing an effective date. Ms. Waldron, this sure feels like checking the box.
Good evening. Yes, we have been awarded a grant, and this is an authorized signature form that they require be passed by resolution of the City Council, and so we are bringing it to you for the approval of those 4 positions that you just listed.
Council, do you have any questions for Ms. Waldron?
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve from Mayor Pro Tem Nelson.
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Ennis. Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
The motion passes 4-0. Council, we are now moving to item 12G. Consider action to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2019-01 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, amending the Bastrop City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 15, Article 15.01, Section 15.01.016, Monument, Memorial, or Tombstones, construction permit required, repealing conflicting provisions, providing for a severability clause, establishing an effective date, and move to include on the February 26 consent agenda for a second reading. Ms. Waldron.
Yes. So how this was brought up, just to give a little background, is that we have had several variances come to council. I've been here 6 years. I think there's been at least 2 or 3 that have come that have been requesting a variance on the height of the monuments. I know that the advisory board has discussed this particular restriction that's in our code, and the last major revision we did to this code, we did have the discussion of the monument heights, and at that time they brought forward to council that we keep the restriction and that we continue just to allow the variances if there are any. We've met again with the board, and we've brought in a monument company that brought some education and answered some questions for the advisory board, and the board is bringing forth a recommendation to amend this code to allow for to basically take the height restriction off of the code, but that anything that's over the 6 feet, that the monument company does need to provide the specs for how they're going to handle the additional height, and that would be approved by our city engineer before a permit for work would be issued. And so this is what we're bringing for.
So you'd be securing the footing to make sure that they were safe, is that?
And just knowing that, you know, the plans have been approved before they move forward with that.
Councilmember Rogers? Any comments from council? Any questions? Councilmember Jones?
I remember when we workshopped this, and I personally was wholeheartedly agreeing with those restrictions being removed, and that we allow for more of people to be able to express their own personality or celebration for those people that they had. And so I, wholeheartedly move to approve.
I have a motion to approve from Councilmember Jones.
Second.
I I have a second from Councilmember Ennis. Is there any further discussion?
Mayor, I just want to add that in light of the conversation we had earlier with Matt Lewis, one of the things that is authentic Bastrop is Fairview Cemetery. And I happen to be really interested in the history that you find in cemeteries and photography. And the thing that strikes me most is the old section of that cemetery that dates back to the 1800s is interesting because of the variety of the height, the monument size, and all of that. So in the spirit of what y'all are doing to maintain all things authentic Bastrop, I think this is a really good move to go back and add the variety and the interest that makes the historical aspects of Fairview Cemetery a real jewel in our community from a historic perspective.
Thank you, City Manager. Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0. We're on the last of the individual consideration items. 12J, consider action to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2019-03 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, amending the budget for the fiscal year 2019 in accordance with existing statutory requirements, appropriating the various amounts herein as attached in Exhibit A, repealing all prior ordinances and actions in conflict herewith, establishing an effective date, and move to include on the February 26, 2019 City Council agenda for a second reading. Ms. Waldron.
Yes, so as you know, you approved the fiscal 19 budget on 2018. Since that date, there have been some unforeseen expenditures that are increasing the appropriations, and I will go over each one of them individually by fund. This is very administrative. The Parks Department, there was some damage to city properties. We received insurance proceeds, and we now need to increase the expenditure to pay for those repairs. The debt service fund, this is just to appropriate the principal and interest payments that came with the bond series that was approved on September 20th of 2018.
Ms. Waldron?
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask you a quick question before you get too far off?
Yes.
The expenditures for the parks, didn't we receive money?
Yes.
It's a
neutral
pass-through, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make that clear to everybody watching.
Yes. And the water fund, I know we've talked about the flooding events in October of 2018 at almost every meeting, and this is the amendment that's bringing forth to increase those expenditures for the filters to cover us for the rest of the fiscal year. Also, there was a carryover on tank painting projects. There's quite a few tanks that are having repainted this year, and this, I think it was like $16,000 we needed to appropriate to get to the total project costs. And the wastewater capital fund, you heard from Trey earlier regarding the elevated tank and the ground storage tank. This is just appropriating the funds. We had originally put it in fiscal 20. We're now needing to bring 50% of it back into fiscal 19 because that project will get going before this year is over. Also, we have received contracts for Excess Ranch Water Plant and the transfer lines to Willow, and with those contracted amounts, we needed a budget amendment. We had estimates in the budget, but now that we have final contracts, we needed to appropriate the additional funds needed to get through those designs. Also, we have been informed that the Department of Transportation, the frontage roads that were also talked about earlier tonight, are going to require a sewer line to be relocated, and so this appropriates that amount as well. All of these amendments decrease the available fund balance in this capital fund. The Vehicle Equipment and Replacement Fund had a new service truck for Bastrop Power and Light included in the original budget, but because of steel prices and a few other increases, just general increases, the amount has increased since they originally got the bid in May, I believe. So this appropriates the additional funds for them to be able to go ahead and order that truck. and in the impact fund. Due to significant changes in our project estimates since our last impact fee study, we are in need of an updated study, and so this appropriates the cost in the impact fund to pay for that impact fee study update.
Ms. Waldron, I see on that one that there's two different line items. The 50 is one for water and one for wastewater?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We just split them 50-50 between them.
Thanks.
And Mayor and Council, our rate consultant, Chris Eckroot, that has dealt with our water and wastewater rates, will be here on the 26th to deal with our wholesale water and wastewater rates. And as soon as he gets through with the wholesale portion, then he will move into the impact fees and adjust the water, wastewater rates based on the wholesale, by the water and wastewater rates that he's done. So it makes sense for Chris to continue to do all of these and not have to re-engineer the work with different consultants. So this will be the third step once we get through the next council meeting.
We can address any questions you have.
And that's the last one, isn't it?
I believe so, yes.
And then thank you for, and thank you, Councilmember Rogers, for requesting this, but the all funds summary is a very helpful way of keeping track of things, and I appreciate you having that in here. So are there any further questions for Ms. Waldron?
Move to approve.
All right. Oh, second. I have a motion to approve from Councilmember Rogers, a second from Councilmember Jones. Is there any further questions? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Councilmember Ennis?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nelson?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0. We will now be going into executive session. We will be talking about two different items, but on 13A, I'm going to read it and then talk about it a second. City Council will convene into closed executive session pursuant to Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code to confer with the city attorney and outside legal counsel regarding the status of Hunters Crossing Public Improvement District. Mayor Pro Tem Nelson will be recusing himself from that discussion, so he will not be in the executive session, but we will still have a quorum, which is why we will be in executive session. When we are done with item 13A in the same executive session, we will move forward with item 13B. City Council shall convene into closed executive session pursuant to Section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code to discuss a salary for the presiding judge and the associate judge request for qualification process for the municipal court. It is 9:17 and we are in executive session. Okay, it is 11 p.m. We are back in regular session. For item 14, take any necessary appropriate actions as a result of executive session. There are none. So
Move to adjourn.
I have a move to adjourn. It's 11 p.m. and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.